Over the past few weeks, Vic Saylor had been noticing that something was wrong with Terry, his beautiful wife of 3 years. He tried to talk to her about it, but she constantly brushed it off, saying that everything was fine and that everything would be fine. Vic was away on Wednesday and Thursday. He was supposed to return home on Friday, but things went so well that he returned on Thursday afternoon. He immediately drove home, called Terry, and told her he was home, and asked if she wanted to have dinner together. She was surprised by his call. She said she was sorry, but they had an emergency, and, thinking he wouldn't be back until tomorrow, she agreed to work late. She probably won't get home until midnight. The company has a strict rule that no employee should be on the premises between midnight and 5:30 in the morning. Honey, I'm very sorry, but at this hour I won't be able to find a replacement. See you in the morning. He told her that he would wait for her. She flatly turned him down when he suggested they meet for dinner before her night shift started. He was stunned by this refusal and could not imagine that it could be so important that she could not find time to have dinner with him. But what can you do? When she returned home a little after midnight, he thought she looked a little strange, but nothing special. She said, "If it weren't for the company rule, I'd probably still be at work." She said that she was very tired, took a shower, and immediately went to bed, giving Vic a routine kiss and turning her back to him. Vic was disappointed. He wanted to make love to his wife and show how much he missed her. In the morning, he found it strange that she was in no hurry to leave the house and returned to the office early to finish the rest of her work. In fact, she complained that she was tired after last night and left a little later. Vic went to work himself. Terry and Vic work for the same company, but in different departments. That evening, while helping Terry clean up after dinner, Vic began watching their college football team play against one of their main rivals. She had been quieter and more withdrawn than usual during dinner, and he had been unable to get her to talk. He was a little worried when she headed to the bedroom instead of joining him to watch the game. She was also a football fan. But he knew that her women's days were about to begin, and perhaps this unsettled her. About 15 minutes later, she came into the room, and when he looked up at her, it seemed to him that she was crying. She held a manila envelope in her hands, which she dropped into his lap as she stood in front of him. He looked at the envelope, then at her and asked, "Darling, what happened? What is this? What's going on?" She looked at him for a moment and then said in an irritated voice, "You know exactly what's going on. Open the damn envelope and enjoy your gift." Stunned, he opened the envelope and took out 6 large photographs. Seeing their contents, his mouth opened in amazement. He was speechless, and tears began to well up in his eyes. When he finally found the strength to speak, through a flood of tears, he said, "Terry, what the hell is going on? What does this mean?" He just wanted to throw up. He looked at photographs of his wife having sex with one of his colleagues in various positions. On the way to the bedroom, through a flood of tears, she screamed, "This is what you get for cheating on me, you bastard." Vic was speechless. The emotions of pain, rage, murder, suicide, revenge, love, hatred, and victimhood fought for primacy with each other. After a few minutes, he was left with nothing but terrible pain, trying to understand what had happened. One thing he knew for sure, he had never, ever cheated on his wife. So what was behind this? Luckily, tomorrow was Saturday, and they could talk. He knew they wouldn't be able to have a rational discussion that night. He was too upset to formulate coherent thoughts, let alone express them. He couldn't watch the game. It was something they usually did together. Turning off the TV, he went to the spare bedroom, where he couldn't even sleep. By midnight, it had cooled down a bit. He was still in a lot of pain, but he still loved his beautiful wife. As the hours passed towards dawn, he tried to erase the images in the photographs from his memory and began to search for a rational explanation for what led to this. It didn't take him long to dismiss the idea that Terry was actually having an affair. She accused him of cheating, and the photos he saw seemed like revenge, the purpose of which was to cause pain. And indeed it is. At dawn, he came to the conclusion that Lanny, the creep who had sex with his wife, had somehow set her up. Lanny had been stalking her ever since he came to work, and Terry had told him off more than once. In fact, Vic himself once cornered him at a party and threatened him if he didn't leave Terry alone. Accepting that it was a setup didn't make the pain any less, but it did give Vic something to work with. At dawn, he went to the kitchen and made coffee, continuing to think about the situation. Once the coffee was ready, Terry walked in, looking at the floor. She looked like microwave death, and it was obvious that she, too, had had a bad night. Before he could say a word, she raised her head, looked at him, began to cry, and exclaimed, "Oh, Vic, how could you? Don't you love me anymore?" He stood up and walked towards her, trying to hug her. She simply pulled away, saying that she didn't want him to touch her right now, that she wasn't sure if she wanted him to ever touch her again, and asked again, "How could you?" Vic backed down and told her he didn't know why she thought he was cheating, and asked her to explain what made her think that. In a loving but commanding voice, he said, "Terry, you have to believe me. I have never cheated on you. Please tell me where you get the idea that I have been unfaithful." Her answer was that there was no need to make the situation worse by lying, that she knew better. He confirmed that he didn't cheat, and he deserves to know why he was convicted for something he didn't do. He finished by asking, "Terry, don't I have the right to a fair trial? Should I suffer even more for something that didn't happen?" She demanded that he explain why he was cheating and made it clear that the issue was non-negotiable if he continued to lie. Now, Vic is usually a very calm person, but her response and her seeming reluctance to talk to him drove him crazy. He paused to consider her words and then realized that if there was any chance of sorting things out and saving the marriage, he had to take a tough stand. Everything that guided her was firmly rooted, and it would take dynamite to knock it out. With these thoughts, he exploded. "Terry, I don't know what happened, but you can be sure that whether we stay together or not, I will find out what's going on. Moreover, if you brand me as unfaithful and a liar without discussion, we have nothing to save this marriage. If you want a divorce, say it now, and let's kill this monster you brought into our home and our marriage. Finally, I will give you a week's time starting from now to find the time and opportunity to sit down and discuss this situation intelligently. Otherwise, I will file for divorce. I'll end by saying that I love you, but I can't live with a man who no longer loves me, doesn't trust me, and doesn't even give me a chance to defend myself." With that, he headed to the bedroom. Terry was stunned. In the entire time they met, Vic never spoke to her like that, and never used words that humiliated her. For a moment, she thought there might have been a huge mistake. He sounded very convincing, not the way she thought he would sound if he was lying. She was overcome with a feeling of panic at the thought that she was wrongly seeking revenge. But no, the evidence was there. As he headed toward the bedroom, she asked anxiously, "Vic, where are you going?" He told her he was packing things he would need for the next week and was going to find a motel. He shocked her by saying that he was not in the mood to sleep with a woman of easy virtue right now, and he really didn't want to sit and wonder if she would ever talk to him again. Suddenly, the full weight of the situation hit her, and she began to cry. Now she didn't know what to think. The only thing she was sure of was that she loved him and didn't want to be without him. But how could he do this terrible thing? She ran to him, grabbed him, and asked him to sit down and talk. Vic wanted to melt when he stopped and removed her hand from his. But he knew that this situation would require him to be tough at the moment, and he knew that she was not ready to talk seriously. He looked her in the face and said, "Honey, you know that your behavior has caused me indescribable pain. I don't know what I did to deserve this, but I certainly didn't cheat like you accuse me of. With what happened in the last half hour, I see that you are in no condition to talk about our situation, so I will go to a motel where I can calmly think. I don't think you want to sleep with me, and after what I saw, I absolutely don't. I want to be so close to you. I will call you and tell you where I am." Terry sank onto the sofa and made no attempt to stop the flow of tears. Vic left, saying that he would call as soon as he found a room. She had no choice but to feel the pain and relive the events of the last month. It happened exactly 3 weeks ago when Melvin Frost, Vic's boss, stopped by her desk and asked her to come to his office when she had a free minute. Mel was a mystery to her. She knew that Vic respected him professionally, but she also knew that Vic did not like him as a person. In fact, she remembered Vic once joking to a group of friends, "I know Mel doesn't have hemorrhoids because a perfect ass can't have hemorrhoids." Everyone burst out laughing. Through the company's family and entertainment events, they both knew each other's co-workers at least a little. Of course, she knew Mal well enough. When she arrived at his office, he invited her to sit and offered her a soda. She politely refused. After Mel talked for a few minutes about how much he appreciated Vic and what a great team member he was, he suddenly stopped. Lowering his voice, he told her that while he appreciated Vic and his work, he had recently become aware of a problem that Vic was involved in. He didn't want to say too much, but there were rumors that Vic was involved in a relationship with an employee, and since it was against company policy, he began investigating. He continued by saying that he called her because he believed she had a right to know what was going on. She was shocked and depressed. She loved Vic and did not want to believe that he could do this to her. She asked him what these suspicions were based on. He showed her some photographs. In one of them, Vic hugged his secretary by the shoulder at the coffee machine. The other was a slightly more questionable image. It looked like she was about to sit on his lap or had just gotten up from it. It didn't matter which direction she was moving. Her skirt was raised above her knees. She asked if he was going to fire Vic, to which he replied, yes, if the suspicions were confirmed. Before she left, he told her that it was up to her, but they didn't have much evidence yet. And if she wants to confirm suspicions, then she should not tell Vic about it until more evidence is collected. The person in question was Helen Williams, the group's secretary. Vic wasn't high enough in the ranks to have his own secretary. He shared a secretary with two colleagues. Terry knew, or rather, was familiar with Helen and knew that she was a stunning beauty. Helen was probably 8 or 9 years older than Vic, and she was married with 2 teenagers. Terry had never been jealous of her before, but now she began to feel pangs of jealousy. She told Mal that she wouldn't say anything until there was more evidence. She hoped and prayed that the rumors were unfounded. Leaving his office, she went to the ladies' room, where she burst into tears. She loved Vic and thought that he loved her too. How could he do this? That's how it all started. After that day, Mel kept her informed of subsequent incidents of alleged inappropriate behavior by Vic. Each time, he told her what had happened and showed her photographs or played recorded telephone conversations that seemed to confirm inappropriate behavior. Terry's jealousy grew with each report, and she became uncomfortable with Vic at home. She began to avoid him and reject his amorous overtures. They haven't made love for over a month. This scenario continued until last Thursday. Shortly after arriving at work, Mel called and asked her to come. Terry knew why she was being called, and she was terribly afraid of it. In Mel's office, he was quick to remind her that Vic was away and that, although she may not have known it, Vic had asked Helen to come over to take notes and handle the massive amount of paperwork they had to work through. The fact that Helen went on the trip and that Vic didn't tell her about it made Terry inwardly furious. Her rage intensified when Mel showed a photo of the two of them entering a hotel room. He then gave her another photograph in which Vic appeared to be leaving the room and Helen was standing at the door, dressed in a short robe and underwear. Mel quickly explained that he was sorry they weren't able to take crucial pictures inside the room, but the photos were telling enough. Terry lost her composure at that moment and began calling Vic all sorts of names and talking about how she would kill him when he returned home. Mel walked over to her and consoled her. When she calmed down a little, he asked her if she really meant what she said and if she really loved him. She thought for a moment, then burst into tears and confirmed that she truly loved him. She was so vulnerable. She never thought that Vic was capable of this. Now she didn't know what to do. Mel sympathized with her for a while and then sat down in the chair next to her and said, "Terry, I don't know what to advise you. I'm not a consultant. However, I can tell you about a solution that I saw with my own eyes. It worked, when my father cheated on my mother. Terry wiped her face with a paper napkin, looked at Mel, and asked, "What happened?" Mel said, "She made her father suffer the same way he made her suffer. She took revenge by sleeping with another man and making sure her father found out. I can tell you for sure he never cheated again." Terry thought about what she had just heard and replied that she needed to think about this decision. She wasn't sure if this was a good idea. Mel said it was her decision. He simply shares what he saw. He hastened to add that whatever she decided, she should not delay, otherwise other problems might arise. She wanted to know what problems he was talking about. Mel said he could not allow this situation to continue or the firm could end up in litigation. Such behavior between employees, especially during work hours and on company premises, is grounds for immediate dismissal. She thought about it some more and finally told him, "Maybe revenge and hurting would actually work. But I don't want to take any chances with a stranger or any of my friends. I don't know anyone I feel comfortable with." Mel thought for a few minutes. Finally, he spoke. "I really shouldn't say this because I could get fired if something goes wrong. But do you want to hear?" She answered in the affirmative. He said, "Okay, this stays in my office. There are people in your husband's department who would like to sleep with you. I know one in particular, and I know him well. I know his feelings from locker room conversations. That sounds interesting." She was confused by this sudden change of events, but she also wanted to quickly get to the bottom of the situation and replied, "But he works with my husband. That will create real problems at work." Mel told her gently that if everything turned out to be true, as he was sure it would be, the person in question would likely take Vic's position since Vic would no longer be allowed to remain in the company. Terry burst into tears again. Now she found herself in double jeopardy. Her husband was unfaithful, and he was losing his job. Then she stopped her tears for a moment and asked, "What about my work?" Mel said she did not violate company policy. Whether she stays or not after Vic is fired depends on her. Then she asked, "But if I commit an act of revenge with that person you mentioned, wouldn't that be the same thing that Vic does?" Mel smiled again and replied, "This is where my job is truly at risk. As long as it's done quietly and without other people involved, we can just pretend it never happened. I really appreciate Vic, and if this helps prevent his mistakes from happening again at the next job, I'm willing to take the risk." She then asked, "What makes you think this person would actually agree to participate?" Mel said, "Wait a minute." He walked over to his desk, inserted the tape into the player, fiddled around a bit until he found the right spot, and pressed play, saying, "Just listen." The sound began and several men could be heard discussing the previous game. The tape didn't run long before the conversation turned to women and sex. Suddenly someone asked, "Hey Lanny, if you could have sex with any wife in the department, who would you choose?" Without hesitation, he replied, "Vic's wife, Terry. She looks damn hot. Hey, if you don't want me to ruin my pants right now, change the subject." Then, pretending, he added, "Okay, never mind, it's too late." Everyone laughed. Mel stopped the tape and asked her if that answered her question. Terry was visibly shocked. Besides, although she had never thought much about Lanny, she now remembered that she had sometimes watched him and thought that he was probably a good lover for some lucky woman. With this confession, a slight shiver ran down her spine, and she began to wonder what it would be like if Lanny could stop Vic. What Lanny said was completely inappropriate and embarrassing, but it was obscene and so exciting to hear someone express such thoughts about her. She was pulled out of her thoughts when Mal asked her what she thought. She didn't know what to say. It was all so unexpected and completely out of line with her usual way of thinking and behaving that she simply stared at Mel. Finally, she replied, "I just don't know. What you suggested might actually work, but I'm not sure. Even if I agreed, I don't think I could approach Lanny with that proposal." After a short pause for her to think about her words, Mel asked her, "If everything was arranged, would you want to do it?" She still didn't know. He said, "You just want to see if it works." Again, she couldn't give him a definite answer. Then Mel took the phone, put it on speaker, dialed a number, and put a finger to her lips, signaling for her to be silent. The phone rang twice, and a man's voice answered in a very businesslike tone, Lanny Southard. Mel introduced himself, and they talked for a few minutes. Mel then asked, Lanny, what do you think of Vic's wife, Terry? Lanny hesitated for a moment, and then, with a chuckle in his voice, asked, You mean professionally or personally? Mel said it was both. Lanny replied that he could not judge her professionally since she worked in a different department. Then, more enthusiastically, he said, Not professionally, but I think she's one of the hottest things in the world. I'm jealous of Vic getting to go to bed with her. I'd give anything for one chance like that. Terry found it difficult to breathe and remain silent, and her face turned completely red. Mel laughed and said, Lanny, I'm on speaker and Terry is here with me. We want to talk to you for a minute. I'm guessing from what you just said, there's no one near you. Lanny responded after a moment, Mal, there's no one here. Then, sounding embarrassed, he added, Jiz Terry, I'm terribly sorry you heard that. After another pause, he continued, I'm really sorry, but I have to be honest with you and say that these are my true feelings. I like looking at you when you're around, and I'm jealous of Vic. Terry didn't understand what was happening. Suddenly, the situation became very interesting, and she began to think that revenge might be just what was needed, not only for Vic, but also for herself. From that moment on, everything started moving very quickly. Terry and Mel explained the situation to Lanny, and a brief discussion ensued. At the end of the discussion, Lanny said, Well, this is not the way I would like to start this kind of relationship. I am being asked to provide the services of a stallion. But my mother did not raise fools, and I would be a fool to turn down such a fantastic opportunity. Terry, hearing Lanny's remark, felt bad about the way he was asked to help her. She replied, Lanny, I didn't mean for it to sound the way it did. I noticed you and thought you were probably a good lover for some lucky women. I'll just include myself in that lucky group. Losing all sense of time and discussion, Terry suddenly heard Lanny say, Terry, I'll be out of town all next week. I sure don't want to miss this opportunity like you're suggesting. Do you want to come to my place after work tonight? It took her a moment to fully comprehend the meaning of what was happening and what she had just been asked. Without thinking too much, she decided that if everything was already planned, then why not move on? She almost felt sick when she confirmed her participation for the evening. Lanny gave her his address and phone number, telling her to come around 6, and he would be home half an hour earlier. He warned that they should not enter together so as not to attract unnecessary attention. Since they didn't want to be seen in public, he will order Chinese food for dinner. Mel interrupted her thoughts again, telling her that she needed to get back to the office and that he would make sure Lanny installed the camera. For the rest of the day, Terry was unable to concentrate on her work. She spent a lot of time fantasizing about the upcoming evening. In the middle of one of her fantasies, her phone rang. She was shocked to the core when she heard Vic's voice. She tried to sound natural as she greeted him with his unexpected early return, and then said that there was an emergency, and since she didn't expect him home until tomorrow, she agreed to work late. He was disappointed, but said that he would wait for her. Oh shit. One thing she definitely didn't want was for him to wait for her tonight. Then she thought, who cares? This was not the way she had planned to reveal her actions, but who cares? After thinking a little more, she decided that she wanted the photos to reveal their sexual relationship, not just for Vic to find out about it while trying to make love to her. But now she really didn't want to make love to him. She picked up the phone and called Mel, saying that Vic had returned home and would be waiting for her. She asked when she could get the photos to deliver the full blow. She was delighted when Mel said they would use a digital camera and give her the photos when she got home. She hung up and asked herself, what did he mean when he said they would use a digital camera and they would give her photographs? She thought about it for a moment, then dismissed it as just an expression. Her next thought was that she couldn't go home after work, and her business suit with flat shoes didn't quite fit the bill. She told her boss she was leaving early and headed to Nordstrom's. She decided she needed black stockings, nice black high heels, a sexier bra, and a replacement for her cotton panties. After finding shoes she liked, she headed to the lingerie department. Along the way, she noticed a very sheer black button-up blouse with a ruffled front. She bought it, and in the lingerie department, she only bought very sheer butterfly panties and black stockings. The butterflies in her stomach were already raging when she returned to the office. She went to the ladies' room and used the handicap stall as a changing room so that no one would accidentally see her while she was changing. When she came out of the stall, she was wearing a girdle with new black stockings and butterfly panties. Her legs looked even better in high heels. The skirt of her business suit wasn't as short as she would have liked, but it looked good with the heels. There was nothing above the waist except a transparent blouse. There was no doubt about what her breasts looked like. In the end, she put on a business suit jacket. With a jacket, no one would suspect what was underneath. Now she was ready, but she still had 45 minutes before meeting Lanny. She returned to her office, and her thoughts began to race. What if Mel's evidence turns out to be wrong? But there are too many signs that Mel is right. Assuming everything is as it seems, would she be harming her marriage if she did so? With that thought, she stopped and anger began to build at what Vic had done. For the next 10 minutes, she wrestled with the pros and cons. Suddenly, she remembered Lanny's words and what he had said. Her nerves were on edge, and she began to seriously doubt whether she should continue. She was already reaching for the phone to call Lanny and cancel everything when the phone rang. She shuddered and answered, trying to calm down. A man's voice said, "Hello, beauty. I'm home. Come when you're ready. I'm looking forward to our evening, even if the initiative didn't come from me." She said, "Lanny," and then hesitated. She was about to refuse when he said, "Terry, are you still here? I have wine in the refrigerator, and I'm looking forward to you coming and drinking it with me." Listening to his soft voice, she said, "I'm almost ready. See you in 10 minutes." She found it difficult to put down the phone with her hands shaking. She was already ready, and this did not calm her nerves. Lanny met her at the door. He was wearing a robe, and she didn't know what was underneath. He gently pulled her towards him and kissed her. Then, noticing that she was trembling, he suggested that she sit on the sofa, drink wine, and get to know each other a little better. He offered to take her jacket, but she said she wasn't ready yet. She felt better because he was not rushing things. Looking around, she asked, "Where is the camera?" He went to the counter to pour some wine and started talking about how much he admired her and how beautiful she was. He said he hoped the evening would be as special for her as it was for him. His soft voice and gentle manner began to calm her down, and she began to relax a little. As he turned with the wine, his robe opened slightly. The moment was fleeting, but now she knew there was nothing underneath it but Lanny. When their glasses were empty, Lanny refilled them. Turning around, his robe opened again for a moment. They made love. She heard Lanny talking to someone, a man. A moment later, he returned with a smile on his face and announced that the photographer had arrived. She was ready to panic, grab her clothes, and leave. Nobody talked about the photographer. She thought it would just be sex with Lanny and no one else would be involved. She covered herself with a sheet and was about to talk to Lanny when a figure walked through the door. To her horror, when he came into the light, she recognized Mal. She screamed, "That wasn't part of the deal. I'm leaving here." Lanny walked up to her, hugged her, and in a soft voice began to explain that he was truly sorry that she had not expected the photographer. He gently explained that there was no way to set up the camera to automatically capture the right moments. Someone had to operate the camera. He apologized again and went on to explain that he simply assumed that she would understand that the shoot required a photographer. She calmed down and Mel left the room. Lanny was caring and affectionate. Suddenly, she asked, "Why is Mel here?" Lanny explained that in order to keep the whole story a secret, Mel offered to be the photographer. He didn't want to attract more people. He then said, "To make it easier for you, I'm going to ask Mel to stay outside until we're ready to take pictures." Terry was shocked. All her fears and doubts returned. However, her condition before Mel's arrival allowed Lanny to rekindle her passion within a few minutes. The photos were taken early, and then they had a threesome. Around 11, they grabbed a camera and went to Lanny's office to print out the photos Terry wanted. Mel quickly said that she couldn't have pictures of him. Lanny walked her to the car before midnight. As soon as he left, she burst into tears, realizing what she had done. This went much further than she imagined. She behaved like a real woman of easy virtue. After drying her tears, she started the car and realized that she couldn't go home dressed like that. She thought about going to the ladies' room in the office, but decided against it, knowing that she would have to check in and would probably not be allowed in at this late hour. She stopped at a gas station and changed clothes in the restroom. When she returned home, she was disturbed that Vic was actually waiting for her. She used the excuse that she was too tired and went to bed after a much-needed shower. She pretended to fall asleep, but could not sleep. Her head was full of images of tonight. She felt shame and dirt. Why did she do this? She was certainly lost in the passion of the moment. What bothered her was that she actually enjoyed it, even with Mal. But Vic was right. Mel is an asshole with very little tools. Before returning home, she firmly decided that she would wait until tomorrow to show the photographs to Vic. The only question now was, would she have the courage to show them off in person? She knew it would hurt her almost as much as it hurt him. But in the end, he is the one who started this whole chain of events. Finding a motel over the weekend suited Vic, and he went to work on Monday, determined to find out what was going on. He also planned to make sure Lanny got what he deserved. During the day, he could not find anything. However, he arranged the work so that Lanny would stay late, until 8 or 9 in the evening. He was pleased that Lanny was proud of his BMW, and therefore usually drove to work, even if it was only a few blocks. BMW will help with retaliation. Over the weekend, Terry was tormented by feelings of guilt and betrayal. She didn't try to contact Victor until late Sunday evening. They needed to talk. She needed to know what made him do this. He did not answer her calls 3 times, and his mobile phone was switched off. By Monday, she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. She didn't want to bring it up at work, but she needed answers. Shortly after lunch, Terry went to his office. Her face was once again showing signs of another night of little sleep and probably a lot of tears. She asked if she could come in, and he asked if it was on business. She said, "No, but we need to talk." Vic stood up from the table and approached her. He didn't touch her, but in a very quiet voice, he asked if she was ready to tell her what happened. She replied that she now wanted to know why he did what he did. Then he said in a low but commanding voice, "Terry, I already told you there's nothing to tell. It's all a fantasy you created. I guess you did it to justify your sex with Lanny. We won't discuss that dirty mess here. I'll be happy to come home when you're ready to tell me what's going on. Until then, just stay away from me." She started sobbing, and he told her to go back to her office. After work, he returned to his motel room and collected some things he had brought from home that might seem strange under the circumstances. It was a dark canvas bag, a face mask, a 3-inch piece of 1-inch diameter pipe, a roofing hook knife, a 12-ounce rubber sledgehammer, a pair of old gardening gloves, a baseball bat, and a pair of worn-out sneakers, as well as a nearly worn-out tracksuit. He ate something and then watched TV until 7:30. He then put on a tracksuit and sneakers and put the rest of the items in a canvas bag, along with 6 packets of sugar that he picked up at noon from one of the hotels. He drove to the company parking lot and parked in the shade, where he could see Lanny's car, the elevator doors, and could quickly and easily leave the lot. Lanny's car was parked in its usual place, next to the elevator, with good lighting, but slightly away from the security camera. As he crossed the parking lot to Lanny's car, he used a sledgehammer and a roofing knife to vandalize the BMW. The windows were broken, the upholstery was cut, the paint was scratched, the body was dented, and the stereo and console were smashed. Satisfied with his work, he poured the sugar into the gas tank. Walking back to his car, he picked up his cell phone and called his father. His watch showed 5 minutes past 8. Long conversations with his father were not unusual for him. Tonight was no exception, but my father wanted to know why he didn't watch football on Monday night. Vic explained that he was at a motel and began to explain what had happened over the past few days. When he saw the elevator doors open around 8:15, he told his father to wait a minute, that someone was at the door. He turned off the phone, quickly put on his mask and gloves, and picked up a bat and a piece of pipe. Moving quickly through the shadows toward Lanny's car, he gripped the pipe tightly in his right hand. He stepped out of the shadows a few feet from Lanny, who had just noticed that his car had been vandalized. Lanny didn't even have time to understand what happened. Vic hit him. He dropped the pipe and bat, turned and disappeared into the shadows. He was pleased, and it took less than 2 minutes. Returning to his car and removing his mask, he released the brake and let the car roll down the ramp to the next level before starting the engine and leaving the parking lot. As he walked down the ramp, he picked up his phone, apologized to his father for the interruption, and continued talking to him for another 20 minutes. He was wearing running shorts and a t-shirt under his tracksuit. When he finished talking to his father, he took off his tracksuit and threw the items one at a time into different trash cans on the way back to the motel. Returning to his room, he was still very worried about many things. But one thing didn't bother him at the moment: those 2 minutes of his life when he felt completely satisfied. It was one of those rare moments in life when the sense of accomplishment seemed so strong. On Tuesday morning, shortly after the office opened, Mel walked into Vic's office with a uniformed police officer and a plainclothes detective. Mel said, "Vic, you probably haven't heard yet, but Lanny was brutally beaten and his car was vandalized last night as he was leaving work. He's in the hospital and will be there for a few days. I understand he stayed late to finish the job you assigned him." Vic feigned shock and surprise, confirmed that he knew nothing, and asked how seriously Lanny was hurt and if they knew who did it. He then told Mal that, yes, Lanny did stay late, and he expected Lanny to be a little late this morning, but he didn't expect this. Mel said, "I was sure you didn't know, but these officers want to talk to you." The detective spoke first and bluntly asked Vic where he had been last night. Vic said he was in his motel room. Mel intervened and asked why he was staying at the motel. Vic simply said that he and Terry had a little problem and it was personal. The detective intervened again and asked what hours he was in his room. Vic played the role and said with annoyance, "Wait, what's going on here?" And then he added indignantly, "Are you saying that I was involved in the attack on Lanny?" Mel tried to soften the situation by saying that Lanny had said something about Vic when they were talking about the incident at the hospital. He noted that he understood that Lanny was badly injured and was under heavy sedation. Vic said, "No wonder he said something about me. Did he say anything about the job he was doing? I figured he'd bring it to me this morning. Now I'll have to go and look for it." With these words, he headed towards the door. A uniformed policeman blocked his path, and the detective said, "Mr. Saylor, we are not accusing anyone. However, we must check anyone who might have reason to dislike Mr. Lanny." With that, Vic responded sharply, "Who said I don't like Lanny?" The detective responded that Mr. Rizzo Mel told them that Vic threatened Lanny with bodily harm at a company party after Lanny made advances toward his wife. Vic, indignantly, said, "That was over a year ago. He stopped hitting on my wife, and I haven't had any problems with him since. Do I not love him? Yes. I think he's a smug ass, and I'm communicating with him only on professional matters." The detective said he understood, but he needed to know where he was last night from 7:30 to 9 o'clock. Vic pretended to try to remember where he could go, and then said, "Detective, as I told you earlier, I was in his motel room. I was there from 6 in the evening after dinner and did not leave until the morning." The detective asked if anyone was with him, to which Vic replied, "No." The detective chuckled again and then asked why he was using a cell phone in the motel room. The response was, Do you think I'll pay crazy motel phone rates when I already have a prepaid cell phone? The detective chuckled again and asked for his father's phone number. Vic gave it, then picked up his phone, put it on speaker, and said, "Here, we can all talk to him right now and work this out." During the call, Vic's father confirmed that the conversation began immediately after the start of the football game on Monday night at about 5 or 10 minutes past 7 and ended around the beginning of the third quarter around 8:45. The detective thanked him and told Vic that he would receive an official printout from the cell phone company, adding that the information all but cleared him of suspicion. When the three of them left, Vic almost burst with joy. It was great therapy. The image of Lenny suffering in the hospital almost eclipsed the visions of Terry's photographs. He also laughed, knowing that the detective hadn't asked one important question, and Vic knew that the detective would never have thought to ask. "Were you on the phone with him the whole time?" Shortly after the trio left, Arlene, his foster mom at work, came to his door and asked what it all meant. Vic told her, and then she asked if she could close the door and talk for a minute. Vic always enjoyed talking to Arlene. He thought about what he would do without her when she retired in a few months. Arlene sat for a moment, collecting her thoughts. Finally, she told Vic that she had not said anything before because she only had intuitions and suspicions. She knew something was going on between Mel and Lenny. Over the last 6 months, they have been like bread and butter. They often met and discussed things. About 2 months ago, it became clear to her that every time someone approached them, the conversation changed from relatively quiet to louder, businesslike. When they sensed that no one was within earshot, the conversation would become quiet again. She continued, "Vic, just by watching them, I believe they are involved in some type of office shenanigans. But as I said, now these are only suspicions. I cannot provide any solid evidence to confirm my feelings, but I am sure that I am right." Vic was stunned by her revelation. He also knew that she had no love for Mel. After thinking about it for a moment, he told Arlene what had just happened between him and Terry. Arlene was shocked, but she told him that she was now sure of her suspicions and was going to dig as far as she could to find answers. Then she gasped and looked him straight in the eyes, asking, "Vic, do you happen to know anything about what happened to Lenny last night?" Vic held her gaze and said, "Thanks for the information, Arlen. Let me know what turns up as a result of your search. I agree that something is wrong, and I'm going to find out too. It doesn't surprise me, but until now I didn't think Mel was involved." Arlene stood up to leave and said in a quiet voice, "I hope Mel doesn't get caught in the parking lot like poor Lenny." This was said with a sort of evil smile on his face. Later that afternoon, Arlene returned and suggested that Vic keep an eye on the bottom locked drawer in Mel's office. Vic's department staff all have lockers with combination locks for storing confidential documents, but Mel has two. Arlene stated that if you ever walked into his office while that second drawer was open, he would immediately return whatever was in there to the locker and lock it. They both asked the same question: why does he need two boxes? He doesn't do client work directly, and basically the only confidential material he should have is personal stuff, which wouldn't even require one drawer full. Vic decided it might be useful to look into the box and asked Arlene if she would help him look at it. She was hesitant, and Vic assured her that she would not be directly involved. All she had to do was create a momentary distraction. He told her that he wasn't even going to let her in on his plans. Luckily, all the padlocks were issued by the company and were identical. Arlene, on Vic's signal, was to walk into Mel's office and, before he could hide everything, scream and trip. Vic was sure that Mel would rush to her aid, leaving the box unattended for a few moments. Vic was patient, and his patience paid off on Friday, just before the end of the day. He called Arlene and said, "Now, as quickly as possible." She accepted his call and headed to Mel's office. Vic took the padlock from his drawer, which was open, and headed to Mel's office. The timing was perfect, and it came just as Mel was helping Arlene up. He stood behind Mel as if trying to help, took Mel's padlock, put it in his pocket, and left it on the table. Vic told Mel that he would help Arlene get back to her desk. Mel thanked him, saying that it was getting late and he needed to close everything and go home. They had theater tickets for the evening. Hearing this, Vic quietly said to himself, "Thank you, God. I need all the security I can get." Enjoying her good fortune, Arlene asked worriedly, "Did you get what you needed?" He told her, of course, and she replied that he couldn't get much in such a short time. He assured her that he had absolutely everything he needed and kissed her on the cheek as she sat down at her desk. She smiled and shook her head. After a leisurely dinner, Vic returned to the office. He took the key to Mel's office, which the secretary knew he kept in a file in the back of an unlocked closet. He opened the door, walked to the closed second drawer, and opened his lock. He put his lock in his pocket and left Mel's lock next to the box. He took out a digital camera and took a photo of the box so that he could leave it as it was later. He noticed that in addition to the folders, there were audio cassettes, videos, CDs, and even several DVDs. Taking 3 folders, he sat down at Mel's desk. When he opened the first folder, labeled Terry, there were copies of photographs that Terry had brought home. However, in addition to these, there were photographs of Mel having sex with Terry. This infuriated him. He quickly looked into the other 2 folders and found more photos of Mel and Lenny with other women working at the company. He realized he couldn't stay here without risking getting caught. He returned the files, closed the drawer, and hung the lock without closing the latch. He walked down the hall to the library and picked up the library cart. Taking the cart, he returned to Mel's office, placed the contents of the box on the cart, and walked towards his office. It took Vic less than 15 minutes to realize that Mel and Lenny were running a sex ring for their own pleasure and profit. Mel, a smug, pompous ass, was recording many, if not all, of the conversations, and it was obvious that he and Lenny were blackmailing the women. It didn't take much intelligence to realize that their latest victim, Terry, had just fallen into their net. The tapes had start and end dates for recording. One tape indicated that recording had ended today, which was probably why he was interfering with me box this afternoon. He inserted the tape into his player and pressed play. What he heard made him furious. He would fast forward the tape and listen, then fast forward again. Several passages were about Mel and Lenny discussing their progress with Terry. He was about to stop when he heard Terry's name again. He rewinded to the beginning of the conversation and heard Mel tell Michael Jameson, the senior vice president and son of the CEO, that he would arrange everything with Terry for tomorrow evening. Vic couldn't believe Mel was stupid enough to do this at work. He couldn't believe Terry had fallen for this nonsense. After listening to it again, he realized that the conversation was with Michael at home and not in the office. Vic took particular interest in the folder labeled Clients. The folder contained the names of 6 senior executives who clearly benefited from the operation. One was the chief financial officer, and the last one was Senior Vice President Michael. Vic didn't expect to find what he did and initially planned to copy everything that would help him deal with Terry and then return the material to Mel's office. However, he couldn't risk anything happening to this evidence. There was plenty of room in his lockbox, so he put everything in there except a few photographs and 1 cassette tape. He then closed the drawer, taking the photographs and the tape with him. He returned the library cart and then returned to Mel's office. With the latch open, you can change the lock combination. He didn't care what he set it to. He simply changed it, closed the box, and left. Mel will have to cut the lock if he wants to open the box again next week. He looked at his watch. It was a little after 11. In the car, he called Arlene on his cell phone and, apologizing for the late call, told her what he had found. She wanted to hear more details, but he told her that there would definitely be changes in the organizational chart, and he would tell her more on Monday. She begged him to tell her more, but he said he couldn't now because he was already driving up to his house. She warned him not to do anything rash with Terry. He assured her that he wouldn't, but that she would see a completely different Terry on Monday. At this point in his thought process, he was ready to kill Mel and Lenny. He felt a little better knowing that Terry had been seduced by these 2. He still loved her, but he was angry and hurt that she could be so stupid and naive as to listen to them without coming to him. No, he couldn't actually physically hurt her, but she would hear a few words. He got out of the car and walked to the door. When he inserted the key and tried to enter, he found that the lock was locked. He rang the bell. Apparently, Terry was in bed. He kept calling and finally saw Terry peeking out from behind the curtain by the window. She didn't say anything or move to open the door. Inside, Terry was terrified. What could make Vic come at this hour? He told her he wouldn't talk to her until she told her what happened. He became impatient and decided to force her to tell. Her thoughts were interrupted when Vic furiously punched the door and asked if she was going to open the damn door or if he would have to kick it down. After a moment, she opened the lock and began to slowly open the door. He pushed her and she fell. Vic saw that she was terrified and thought to himself that this was a good thing. He helped her up and ordered her to make coffee. This will probably take some time. He didn't ask her to make coffee as usual. He ordered it. He had never done this before, and her fear grew by the minute. She knew she would have to tell him what he wanted to know, or from the looks of it, he might beat it out of her. Vic looked at her and ordered her to stop shaking. He wasn't going to hurt her. Then he said, "Terry, we will talk. We'll deal with this right away, so make your life easier and don't talk nonsense." She was scared to death. He never spoke or behaved like that. She didn't like who Vic was now. However, she gathered her courage and asked why she should talk to him if he would lie anyway. He barked, "Damn it, Terry, stop talking stupid nonsense. I told you I didn't cheat. You don't want to believe me. I have repeatedly asked you to tell or show me how you know using 2 fingers on each hand to show quotes that I am cheating. You don't want to tell me. You did everything you could to prevent me from getting to the bottom of this matter. Well, now we will solve it." He threw the photographs she had given him onto the table. "Okay, that goes without saying. You slept with Lenny, and they tell you everything that happened that night, right?" She replied, "This is a stupid question. You see me having sex with Lenny. What else to say?" Vic stood up, walked over to the coffee maker, poured them both some coffee, and returned to the table. Looking her straight in the eye, he said, "Terry, pictures don't always tell the whole story. Let me ask again, and please think before you answer. Do these photographs tell the whole story of what happened?" She thought for a moment and then replied, "I don't know what you're getting at. No, the photographs do not show all the ways we pleased each other. They don't show all the ways we did it. Is this what you want? What else do you want?" Terry was becoming more and more anxious. Why does he insist on this issue? He's up to something. Is he trying to prove how slutty she was that evening? Then an image of Mel appeared in her head, but he didn't know about it. Finally, she looked at him and asked if he was just there to harass her for what she did to her cheating husband. With irritation in his voice, Vic said, "No, Terry, that's not what I'm here for. I want to get to the bottom of this matter. First of all, I see how you wince every time I talk about sex. If we're going to be honest, let's not beat around the bush by covering up what you did with other languages. You slept with him, that's what you did. Now I will ask the question for the last time, but let me rephrase it. Do these photos show all the sex that happened that evening, except for the different ways you had sex?" She snapped back, "Hell yes. They show everything except all the ways we did it. Can we move on to something else now?" Vic took the second envelope and said, "Yes, let's move on. Please tell me about these photographs. Were they done another time?" He threw in 2 photos of Mel with Terry. She looked at them, reached for them, and, knocking her coffee cup over onto the table, screamed, "Oh, God, where did you get these from?" Tears fell quickly, and she covered her face with her hands. She quietly repeated, oh no," over and over again. Continuing, Vic said, "It doesn't matter where they're from, but I think we can agree that the photo shows there was more going on than you're willing to admit, or you're hosting everyone in the office at different times. Whatever it is, I see you're using the same place. I'll be honest, I don't know what to think about photographs." She sobbed, "No, Vic. Stop, let me explain. He answered her in her own words, I don't need an explanation. It's obvious that you sleep with Mel the same way you sleep with Lenny. God, Terry, what happened to you? She said with a plaintive cry. But Vic, you don't understand. He interrupted her. What is there to understand? Everything is clear in the photographs. You sleep with them. There is no need to explain. She hesitated and replied, but Vic. He interrupted her again. Let's move on. He pulled out some photos of him and Helen and threw them in front of her. She looked at them for a moment and, with her tears temporarily stopping, exclaimed, Yes, I recognize them. They showed me that you are cheating. They ruined you. Now her behavior was becoming hostile again. He held two photographs of himself, entering and leaving Helen's motel room aside. Then he threw another photo. There was a door in this photo, the same door, but with a larger view of the motel. He then told her to study the photographs carefully. She looked for a moment and then said, What are you trying to prove? This photo just shows more of the motel. Vic exploded. Damn it, Terry, you decided to blame me, and you will do it no matter what. Or you're so damn stupid that you need to be sent to a mental hospital. She started to say something, and he took the third photo and held it in front of her face, telling her to shut up, and then asked her several questions in a row without expecting answers. Does this really look like a motel? How many motels have you had without numbers on the doors? How many motels have a path across the lawn to one door? How many motels have you been in where the door to the next room is not either next to yours or within 15-20 feet of yours? Without waiting for an answer, he continued, What you see is the entrance to Helen's condominium. She looked again and realized it wasn't a motel like Vic had said. She didn't know for sure that this was Helen's condominium, but she had to admit to herself that it wasn't a motel. He then continued, Look at what I'm wearing in the two photos. It's not the same suit or tie. Do you think I would keep a change of clothes at her house? Now look at the light. Both photos were taken in daylight. Do you think I would come and go in daylight if I was having an affair? Around this time, Terry began to feel sick to her stomach. Did she make a very big mistake? Vic continued. Look again at the suit in the photo where I'm supposedly leaving the motel. Don't you recognize the suit you insisted I give to Goodwill last winter? Don't you think that based on this, we can say that the photo was taken before my alleged affair? Terry, don't you think your so-called evidence of my affair is starting to look very dubious? Letting the evidence settle in her head for a moment, Vic finally said, One last question, and then I want you to hear part of the audio and look at a few more photos. Answer me this. Given what they told you about my affair and how it was grounds for dismissal, answer me why they didn't fire me a week later. With that, he dropped the remaining contents of the second envelope in front of her and turned on the tape recorder. She replied, It wasn't them. It was only Mel, your boss, who let me know you were cheating. The authority in her voice and the confidence in what she knew to be true began to waver. She was beginning to feel like she had been set up. Now she felt sick and wanted this nightmare to end. There were several photographs of Mel and Lenny having sex with other women in the group. In addition, there were photographs of other men, including some high-ranking executives, having sex with these women. The audio recording contained a conversation between Mel and Lenny about their progress with Terry, and the conversation was not related to her professional development. At this stage, it was obvious that Terry had endured the maximum. She was quickly losing her composure, and Vic decided to wait until tomorrow before playing the clip between Mel and Michael. Terry sobbed inconsolably, realizing that she had indeed made a terrible mistake. What a complete fool she was, realizing that she had been fooled by these two bastards. Even worse, she began to realize the painful and possibly irreparable damage she had done to her marriage. Vic looked at her with mixed feelings of sympathy and rage, although most of the rage was directed at Mel and Lenny. Now he needed to get his act together. He tore down her wall of mistrust and replaced it with a terrible void of self-hate. He knew what he would do next, but he needed to get Terry back into a more rational state. Mel and Lenny had to pay, and pay big. He quietly told her, "I'm going back to my motel room now. You need to come to your senses, and then we will discuss the future. I'm going to play you another recording in the morning, but that's enough for today. I need your help with the next step if we want to see this through. Tomorrow will be a busy day." She just sobbed and said, "Vic, I'm so sorry. Please, do not go. What's on the tape? Please tell me now." He told her that he needed time alone and that he would be back for breakfast in the morning. With that, he kissed the back of her head and said, "I still love you and we'll work it out." Then he remembered to ask her if Mel or Lenny or anyone else from the firm had called her this evening. She replied, "No, why?" He said that he would discuss this in the morning, but under no circumstances should she answer the phone until he arrived in the morning. Again, she wanted to know why, and he said she would understand in the morning, just don't answer the phone. She felt a little better that he didn't seem too mad at her when he left, and that he told her he loved her. At least he'll be back in the morning. Vic returned to his motel room and began preparing for tomorrow. Although he fully understood that Terry had been set up, he was still hurt by what she had done. He knew he would forgive her, but he had no idea what their life would be like now. Unconditional trust has disappeared. It will take a long time to recover, if at all possible. Worst of all, he knew that the images imprinted in his head would only get worse with what he had planned. But right now, destroying Mel and Lenny was the most important thing to him. Vic got home before 7. He slept a little, not much, but enough to recover a little. He could tell from Terry's appearance that she had had a rough night. He helped her with breakfast, and they relaxed for a few minutes before Vic stood up and announced that he had to work. They were going to start by listening to a snippet of the recording. The recording was a conversation between Mel and Michael Birmingham, senior vice president and son of the CEO. Mel informed him that Terry was now in a cage and that there were enough photographs to secure her cooperation. He was confident that Terry would do whatever was necessary to prevent the material from spreading. Michael made it clear that he wanted her immediately. Mel told him that Vic was living in a motel, so he didn't have to worry. With this, Michael asked Mel to give him her phone number, and he himself would arrange everything for tomorrow, Saturday. When the recording ended, Terry fully realized that not only had she been deceived, but she had now become a personal prostitute Mela. She was absolutely stupid. She sobbed uncontrollably, asking Vic how she could get out of this situation. Vic connected the tape recorder to the phone and told Terry that when Michael called, she would have to talk to him. He will certainly insist on a meeting. Terry had to argue with him until he threatened her, and then reluctantly agreed to meet him at home. Terry had been on board with the plan up to this point. But when Vic laid out the rest of the plan, it fell apart. She not only had to arrange the meeting, but also let Michael take her to bed, and Vic had to take photographs of what was happening. Vic laid out the plan completely, which Terry didn't like, but she felt she had no choice. Simply put, she found herself in a hopeless situation. When she asked if she should allow Michael full sex, Vic said yes. The next few minutes were quite unpleasant. Terry asked him how, as her husband, he could knowingly allow another man to have sex with her, or worse, stand next to her, watch, and take pictures. This made Vic somewhat angry, and he replied, "Why should you care whether I know it or not? You weren't particularly worried when you gave me photos of your sex." After several uncomfortable exchanges, Vic raised his hand and said, "Terry, that's enough. What happened, happened. I want, and I think you too, want these guys to pay for their actions. With what I propose, we can do this." She was still very upset and continued to insist that what she did was wrong, but he asked her to do something equally bad. Vic was annoyed, but resisted the urge to explode. In a calm voice, he said, "Honey, this is unpleasant and it's killing me. But as I see it, you got into this situation through sex, and you will have to get out through it." Terry understood the meaning and soon agreed that sexual blackmail must be eliminated. At Vic's urging, she called the other women caught up in the network and told them what was happening. She explained that everything possible would be done to protect them, but there were no guarantees. Before calling the last woman, Michael called. He was very polite and explained that he had heard about her wonderful overtime work and would like to invite her to dinner that evening. Terry politely declined, and he insisted that this was his only opportunity for the next month, and he really didn't want to delay. Terry politely declined again. Michael began to get annoyed and began to put pressure on her. Terry played her role well, portraying the insulted and outraged housewife who knew what he wanted. She planned to tell her husband and complain about him in the office on Monday. Michael finally exploded and told her that if she wanted to keep her job on Monday, she better reconsider. He said there were certain photos that she clearly didn't want to be circulated. Pretending to cry, she finally gave in. But she told him she didn't want to risk being seen. Could he come to her house? He confirmed that Vic did not live at home and agreed to come after 9. Vic and Terry spent the morning trying to make peace, but both understood that this would take time. Vic told her that he had a lot to do and that he would be back after dinner before Michael arrived. Terry begged him to stay because she was very scared. He said he was sorry, but there were things he needed to do. At the motel, he called his longtime golf friend, Alan, a lawyer, and explained the whole situation. When Vic told him about the plans for the evening, Alan whistled and said, "Are you really going to let your wife do this? This will, of course, put the final nail in the coffin, but are you sure?" After listening to the whole situation, Alan said that under the circumstances, it shouldn't wait and asked if Vic could bring samples of evidence and come to his office immediately. Vic took the entire box of evidence and was in Alan's office within half an hour. It didn't take long for Alan to inform Vic that he not only had enough evidence to put Mel and Lenny out of business, but enough to file a significant lawsuit against them and the company. He said, "Vic, this is so big and affects so many senior staff that management needs to know what's going on. They just ignore it like it doesn't exist." Vic asked if the plans for the evening would change anything. Alan said that without proof of the big man's involvement, there would only be enough evidence to catch Mel and Lenny. But with the evidence obtained this evening, the entire operation will be ruined. He then asked, "Are you sure you are willing to pay the price to completely destroy this operation?" Vic admitted to him that he didn't think he could live with himself if he didn't do this, but that he was very worried about the evening. What will this do to their marriage? To this, Alan said, "On Monday, you and Terry will call work and say that you will be late. Come to my office at 9 and bring photos and a recording from the evening. If you do so, I'll finish the final evidence papers, we'll call the sheriff to formally serve the papers, and we'll head to your office as soon as the sheriff arrives. Please do not go into the office until the sheriff and I have escorted you. There will be at least 2 very angry people there if they find out about this. You both being late may cause them to watch." Vic grinned and said, "I'll wait. But if you think Michael is one of those who will wait, I think not, unless we visit him in the hospital." Alan said he didn't hear the last remark and warned him to be careful or he could be charged with assault. Vic chuckled and said, "I'll have to take a chance." After finishing work with Alan before 5, Vic called Terry and asked if she wanted to have dinner. She immediately agreed, but said that she was not very hungry. They each ate a small salad and talked, with Terry making it clear that she was very worried and upset. Vic calmed her down as best he could, but remained adamant that they were going to break this unholy alliance. Vic and Terry lived in the old part of town. This area was once upscale, but has now been eclipsed by larger, newer homes on the west side. It's a one-story, renovated home that they're almost finished with. During the renovation process, they combined 2 bedrooms into one master bedroom with an ensuite bathroom. The bathroom has been enlarged by another bedroom on the opposite side. This bedroom became an office. From the corridor, one could access the bedroom and office. The original door from the hallway to the bathroom was removed during the work. This arrangement allowed Vic to stand in the bathroom with an almost unobstructed view of the bedroom. The legs of the bed face the bathroom. He could enter the bathroom at will through the office. Returning home, Terry went to change clothes for what lay ahead. It took all her courage to stop her tears and put on her makeup. She dressed neatly, but without anything suggestive of sexuality. She was damned if she was going to put on a show for that bastard. She wore a simple skirt and blouse along with regular underwear and low heels. In general, she looked like an ordinary housewife, ready to spend the evening in front of the TV. She walked out and sat with Vic, trying to control her emotions. She wanted to scream and run away. Gathering her courage, she said, "Honey, take the necessary photographs and get me out of this as quickly as possible. Please." Vic smiled at her, kissed her on the cheek, squeezed her hand, and said he would do his best. Just before 9, Vic gave her a quick kiss on the lips and walked into the office. A few minutes after 9, Michael rang the doorbell and Terry turned the tape recorder back on and opened the door. He looked at her and complained that she didn't look ready for the evening he was looking forward to. Terry looked him in the eye and said, "Listen, Michael, you're forcing me to let you have sex with me. I know that there is no point in explaining something to you since this is happening without my consent. So let's get this over with. Have sex with me and get out of here." He grabbed her, pulled her towards him and said, "Listen, bitch, you will give me more than just sex. You will make sure that I am satisfied, and this includes passion, appearance, and sex. In other words, you'll do me damn good. Now get yourself in order, or I'll do it right here and now, and you'll still be looking for a job on Monday. Now go to your bedroom and dress as you would for your lover. You have 15 minutes. With these words, he let her go and pushed her away. She stumbled and, unable to stop crying, went into the bedroom. In the bathroom, she was wiping her face when she heard Vic say, "He just added more pain to what he was already going to get." It didn't help her feel better. She thought to herself, "Thank you very much, dear." She chose one of her sexier night dresses, but not the best one because that bastard would probably rip it. She undressed and put on a dress. She had 10 more minutes, and she thought of taking advantage of this reprieve. Then she changed her mind, stood up and said to herself, "Why put it off? Let's get through this nightmare." She went to the bedroom door and called Michael. He answered and said, "Come out here and let me look at you first." She went into the living room, and she could see that he was pleased with what he saw. She said, "Are you ready for the bedroom now?" She was stunned and panicked when he replied, "I'm happy here." She knew that Vic would not be able to position himself in the hallway to take photographs without being noticed. She came in and sat down next to him. After a few minutes, she suggested that the curtains over the windows were quite transparent and people could see them. She asked him politely if they could go to the bedroom. He looked around and agreed, taking off his shoes and shirt as they walked. As soon as they were in the bedroom, they had sex. She didn't notice when Vic started taking photos. She hoped Vic was ready to intervene now. After a short time, Terry forgot about the purpose of this meeting and that Vic was somewhere nearby. Vic silently cursed himself for setting this up and allowing it to happen. Vic hit Michael and threw him out the door. Michael stood up and walked towards the car before realizing that he had no clothes and the car was locked. He cursed Vic and said that he and his wife would pay for it on Monday. Vic went back into the house and grabbed Michael's clothes and the old lamp, which he hated as much as he hated the front door and that bastard in his driveway. Back outside, he threw Michael's clothes at him and then offered to help him open the car. He hit the driver's window with a lamp, breaking it, and then opened the door. Looking at Michael, he said, "Get out, you bastard, before I use this lamp on you." Michael hurried into the car, threw his clothes on the passenger seat, and started the car. Vic threw the lamp at the car, leaving a nice dent in the hood, and Michael was gone in seconds. Back at the house, he had another problem. Terry was still lying on the bed, sobbing and shedding tears. When she heard Vic return, she looked at him and said, "Oh, Vic, how could you let him do this to me? Do you hate me that much?" It took more than an hour to calm her down. He explained what happened, and she understood what he had done. In the end, that was all the proof they needed. She was ashamed and offended. She's Hody was just trying to get proof, but I was completely carried away. She gave herself to Michael and enjoyed what happened. They talked until the morning and both realized that their lives would never be the same again. But they were both determined to work on their marriage and restore it as much as possible. Most importantly, they both accepted that their love was still intact and worth fighting for. Terry realized that the biggest problem she would have to deal with would be the complete betrayal she had inflicted on Vic. Her sex with 3 men was the least part of the betrayal, and Vic seemed to put it behind him fairly quickly. The biggest betrayal is best described by what Vic told her during their attempts to put their lives back together. He told her that what she did to men was something she would have to live with forever. But what hurt him the most was her obvious low opinion of him when she allowed someone, with questionable evidence, to convince her that he was cheating. He told her that if she had as much faith and love as he did, she would never have allowed her unconfirmed suspicions to take over her mind without talking to him first. His last statement made her realize how difficult it would be to repair their relationship. He said, "Terry, are you sure you want to try to repair this marriage? If your trust in me is the same as you have shown in recent weeks, our marriage will not last long because someday in the future you will again believe that I am not trustworthy and accept the words of another person as truth. At that moment, I will not try to fix anything. I'll just leave. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Terry completely understood and promised him that being a fool once was enough for her. Hello, this is Terry. These events took place about 20 years ago. On Monday, immediately after the incident with Michael, we met with Vic's lawyer, completed the paperwork, and went to the office a little after lunch, accompanied by the sheriff. The documents were handed to the CEO as he was preparing to go to lunch. I don't think he ever had lunch. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Mel, Lenny, Michael, and the rest of the sex ring were given 5 minutes to collect their belongings and were escorted out of the building by security. A lawsuit was filed against the company for $50 million. However, the amount of the claim was reduced to $26 million if the 4 other women were protected from the case, and the company settled the case without any publicity. The company knew that it would lose in court and agreed to $26 million. 4 women were surprised when they were awarded $1 million for their exemplary service. Alan expanded his law practice with the $4 million he received, and Vic and I got $18 million before taxes. Vic was promoted to vice president, but served only 4 more years. I never returned to work. Shortly before his retirement, we bought a condominium in Vail, Colorado, and another in Waikiki in Honolulu. We spent 3 months in the winter at our condominium in Vail. We both started skiing over 15 years ago and love it. The remaining 9 months are spent in our condominium on the island. Vic took up painting, and I think he's doing pretty well. But to tell the truth, I would not want to live on the income from his paintings. I fulfilled my dreams and became a writer. I spend many wonderful hours writing new stories in my office with a magnificent view of the beach and Diamond Head. As with Vic's paintings, I wouldn't want to depend on the income I get from writing. Much of my writing is published in free libraries such as Literotica. We were able to mostly put the past and my stupidity behind us. However, it still hurts when Vic sometimes calls me his 18 millionth lady of the night. But at least we've mostly left it behind us, and of course, enjoying our retirement because of it. The main thing is that we are both grateful that we were able to destroy the dirty network of sexual blackmail. I have certainly learned to appreciate and understand the absolute need to trust and believe in each other. A TV anchor in Honolulu just said tomorrow will be another beautiful day. But you know what? After our experience, if Vic walked in the door right now and told me there would be 4 feet of snow in Honolulu tomorrow, I would drop everything I was doing and immediately go shopping in Honolulu for a pair of skis. You know who I trust. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.